Chairman, and thank you all for the increased emphasis on improving the cost-benefit analysis process as we're moving through with the core. And I think that's something that we hear from everybody, so from different sides, but from everybody. So I think that's something that we need to prioritize. Ms. Larson, you mentioned a lot about small and rural communities with the flood risk management projects and how difficult it is to get those funded and off the ground. How can we improve that process? Is it capacity to develop these projects besides the money issue? Can you make some suggestions there?
One of the there's multiple challenges with these small and rural communities. One of these challenges in these small towns is you may have a director of public works, a one-person shop who is responsible for potholes to, levees. And so in the prioritization at the community level, these small flood control projects maybe aren't at the top of the list. So encouraging and educating on CAP and the other authorities that are out there, I think at least gets them in the door. Mm-hmm. Submit the letter of interest to the Corps so that when the local Corps district gets their funding through the appropriations process, they have a queue. They know who is eligible to do that. The other part of this is, as we talk about BCR and looking at the life safety example, if it's based only on NED, there aren't property values to allow that project to compete appropriately. And so we need to look at what is the life safety here and what's being protected. We see all too often that these projects with the higher NED benefits are the ones that get the funding or get a new start. And so that has to be changed. So we need to look at life safety.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you mentioned that in your opening statement. Mr. McCoy, could you, we championed the provision in Word 2020 that you mentioned in your statement that changed the construction cost share for navigation projects on the waterways. What effect do you think this will have, changing that cost share? Are you seeing any of the effects of that? I know these things go into a process, but what kind of effect would you see on that, changing the cost share provision?
Changing the cost share had an enormous effect on expediting construction costs on the priority projects of the Corps of Engineers. There's no question. It's saved the nation a lot of money in construction costs, and it's allowed the nation to also recognize the benefits sooner.
And that's, you're seeing that on the waterways that you're using, the upper Ohio all the way down to New Orleans. Don't you go all the way down there, don't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask you this. I know that in the upper Ohio, a lot of the locks and dams in that area are very old. You mentioned this in your last answer to the last question. Could you kind of quantify that for people? What is a very old lock and dam, and when was the last time it was major maintenance was done on those?
Well, major maintenance is having to be done on an annual basis, and it's costing this country a lot of money because of the age and condition of the infrastructure, particularly Montgomery, Dash Shields, and Emsworth locks. They're well over their design life, and they're in bad shape. So they are certainly costing a lot of O&M dollars, whereas expediting the construction process would save a lot of money on that side.
Does your business have delays and other things that are associated with the inadequacy of those locks to function that holds up commerce?
Yes, there are unplanned outages occurring on the older infrastructure locks and dams that that industry does not have an opportunity to respond to. So unfortunately, unlike the highway system, there are no detours on the river. So when you have an unplanned outage or a lock outage, traffic sits still for days, perhaps even weeks, and it's costing the country billions of dollars and ultimately the consumers. And it's also making us non-competitive on the global market.
I know you do a lot of other work besides just transportation. Could you, Mr. O'Mara talked a lot about natural infrastructure and how important that is, and then Ms. Larson talked about, green and gray and all of that. As you're conducting your other business applications at Amherst Madison, what kind of considerations do you all take for natural infrastructure? Is that something you think about?
A large part of what we do is, as a contractor for the Corps of Engineers, is we dredge. We dredge out the river to provide adequate river depths to allow commerce to continue to flow. Beneficial use of that dredge material is what we've got to do a better job as a country of finding. So yes, we do have to dispose of that, oftentimes incredibly expensive manners, by taking it to landfills. Sometimes we've got to get creative and use it to build environmentally sensitive or environmental structures for fish habitat structures.
All right, thank you.